Hey folks, David Stewart here. Hope you guys are having a fantastic day. I know I say that like every time, but I really mean it. I'm going to make a video on something I haven't made a video on in quite some time, which is Star Wars. I want to talk a little bit about the Clone Wars 2D animated series, which you can watch as like a part 1 and part 2 on Disney Plus. It came as like a two DVD discs way back in the day. It's 2D animated. It's not the 3D animated TV series that happened later. This was the one done by Genndy Tartakovsky, who I think did Dexter's Laboratory. And it's really good, and I have a lot of appreciation for it. I got to watch the whole thing in its entirety with my son not too long ago. He woke up in the middle of the night and couldn't get back to sleep, so we stayed up and we watched the Clone Wars, and boy did he love this show. If you watch it as it's presented, I think on Disney Plus, or you're watching, the DVDs, what you get, and I haven't seen it in so long, so it was great to go back and watch it. And I think you can even find it for free on YouTube, but I didn't tell you that. Is that it kind of works as a 2-hour movie. It works as a complete unit in and of itself, but it has a really different feel from what you get from most movies, and that is because it is told as a bunch of like 10 or 15 minute shorts that were on Cartoon Network. So the beat sequence on it is really fast. There's like conflict resolution, conflict resolution, conflict resolution. Things happen really fast. They set stuff up, they resolve one thing. They set a thing up, they resolve a different thing. So this the cycle of setting up tension and then resolving previous tension happens in a really fast series, and it all kind of sticks together well, compared to, say, the 3D animated Clone Wars show that came later. That one is really firmly in the TV format, where every single episode has like an ABC story. Every single episode has its own conflict, its own resolution, and yeah, there's arcs that happen in that, but it's definitely a TV show, and it feels like you're watching a 20-minute cartoon show every time that you watch an episode. This one has a totally different feel because of the way that it was constructed. Everything goes together as a whole, and yet there are lots of little conflicts and resolutions, lots of little character progressions that happen within the show. So I do recommend it. If you haven't watched it, it's a great one. The other thing that I really like about it is that it bridges the gap between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, I think, in a really good way. So it sets up Revenge of the Sith in a way that Revenge of the Sith in some ways needs. When we pick back up with Revenge of the Sith, we have Anakin Skywalker, and he's now like, a full-blown hero. When we left him with Attack of the Clones, he had just had his arm chopped off by Count Dooku. So it's good to have some of that gap filled in. And Revenge of the Sith is fine without that setup, but you also have the introduction of characters like General Grievous, and that makes his defeat later on that much better. You also get a lot more Count Dooku, which makes his defeat very early in Revenge of the Sith have a bigger impact, because we have this, I don't know, this weird feeling where we finally meet Count Dooku at the end of Attack of the Clones, and then he gets killed very quickly at the beginning of Revenge of the Sith. So we don't really have a lot of time to know him as a villain, to see how he's running the war, to see how he's working with Darth Sidious. We get to see all of that in the Clone Wars animated TV show. So it's really good in that regard. So let me just go a little bit deeper into setting, characters, plot, and a little bit of the visual design. And I'll actually start with the visual design. One of the things I like about this animated show, and in fact Star Wars in general in the animated formats, and this includes like the Clone Wars TV show as well as in my mind a lot of the video games like Knights of the Old Republic, is that I think the Star Wars aesthetic works really well in a cold medium. If you know the difference between cold media and hot media, cold media is kind of separated from the thing itself, and hot media is like a very literal representation of a thing. So cold media would be like a cartoon. Hot media would be a live action movie, right? That's intended to look realistic and true to life. So animation is, of course, a cold media, and that means that you can sort of gesture towards the aesthetic language of Star Wars in a way that's very effective. You don't need to draw in all the details like you have in a movie set where there's like dirt on the panels of the Millennium Falcon and there's wires here and there's pipes welded to other pipes and doodads. You don't need that level of detail. You can just sort of gesture towards that and you get the idea. So you kind of gesture towards some of the designs that Ralph McQuarrie came up with, the feelings that get expressed with the high detail sets of the movies. And the viewer is able to fill in the details based on that gesture. Just like how if you're looking at a comic book, you don't need to see every nuance of the skin tone of a model of a character to know what that character looks like, or to know that the character is pretty or ugly or things like that. So cold media is able to like paint with broad strokes, in some cases literally, but I'm using that figuratively. And that's the same thing with the animation, like the action of the movie. You're able to show characters moving sort of broadly through different paces and then see the result of the action. That's really where tension, by the way, comes in with a fight scene, is wondering what's going to happen. Not so much, if you're ever describing this in a book, not so much describing every little motion, but rather feeling the tension of what's happening. And George Lucas has actually been very good at this, and all the Star Wars movies, even those not directed by George Lucas, have been fairly good at this. One of the things you'll see with Attack of the Clones is like this focus on the face of Dooku, focus on the face of Anakin with these flashing lightsabers. Well, do you need to see their lightsabers hitting in a really particular way every second? No, you need to see the tension of the characters, what's at stake for the conflict itself, the risk involved in the fight, and then what you want to know as an audience member is what's the result. And that's what really matters for the fight, not every single little detail about what's going on with the fight, though those details are definitely there in the classic Star Wars movies. So anyway, with the animation, you get that. You get the details that matter, and otherwise you can kind of paint things broadly, and it's more about, what you're showing at a large scale rather than like highly detailed. It also gives you the opportunity to do things that would be very difficult to do even with like the 3D Clone Wars TV show. So there's one battle, for example, where there's a giant machine that flies over the battlefield and has this big thing that shoots down into the earth and like wreaks massive havoc, reforms the earth, and Mace Windu has to take it down. This would be something that would be very complicated to animate, but if you're just animating it in a cold medium, it's a little bit easier to get away with. You don't have to put in all those details. You can just draw the outlines of what the object is supposed to be at a large scale and show it happening. It's not more difficult. It's not significantly more difficult to animate like the far out view of this thing, slamming down, than it is to just do a regular character animation. Whereas with doing a lot of 3D modeling, you have to make a new 3D model. You have to figure out how to animate it, particle effects. There's a bunch of extra things that may go into animating something like that. So there's a lot of benefits that happen with this 2D series that make it just feel more epic, I think, than a lot of other Star Wars media. Anyway, I like the visual design. I think it works. Yes, it's very cartoonish, and it's very much in the cold media area, but I think it works. One of the things that we can refer to that's not this, to make my point, is the cartoon section from the Christmas special. This was why everyone was trying to get their hands on a VHS copy of the Christmas special back in like the 1990s. Yes, this was a thing. As people wanted this cartoon with Boba Fett, this thing where Boba Fett was hunting Han Solo. And if you watch that animation, it's very stylized. The characters don't even really look like themselves, but you get the hint of the Star Wars universe beyond just with these broad gestures that it makes. You kind of fill in the details in your mind. You don't need to see every detail in the cold medium. It really works. So if you go and watch that, you'll see a lot of what I'm talking about there with not needing every detail drawn, just the important details, and it's effective. The action and the drama is still just as effective in that media as it would be with something that is a lot more technical. Okay, let's talk about setting, characters, and plot. One of the reasons I love this, again, is it broadens the setting of Star Wars and gives you a lot more of what you want for the idea of the Clone Wars. It makes the Clone Wars feel like a truly epic, truly massive war that's happening between the Republic and the Separatists with the Jedi involved, the clone troopers. You get to see the clone troopers doing their thing. You get to see the Jedi working with them. So it enhances the setting of Star Wars in general. And that's really the star of a lot of Star Wars media that's not the main movies, where there's a lot of character drama. It's the setting. The setting gets a lot of expansion with this little series of mini shorts, or let's think of it as like a movie made of shorts. I think it works really well, and in general, that's one of the best things that is about it. You get to see a lot of the designs that you saw, say, in Attack of the Clones be put to use. The robots that you saw, or the droids that you saw, you get to see new things like that big smasher, and new planets, lots of things like that. Little details about how the Jedi become Jedi Knights. Those are things that are hidden in there. Things about Coruscant, the attack ships. All that stuff gets enhanced, as well as the way that the Sith operate with Count Dooku and Darth Sidious. And that brings me into the characters section. So this, I don't know what to call it, this movie, Star Wars: The Clone Wars, it's really action-packed. That's one of the things that my son loved the most about it. It's like nonstop battles. Everything's just exploding, killing, war. Wow, it's cool. And yeah, it really blows your socks off with that. But it gets to show you a lot of the characters that help Revenge of the Sith. I guess it's the character exposition in Clone Wars really supports Revenge of the Sith and all the conclusions that are in it. That's the way that I would put it. So you get to see Count Dooku. You get to see what he's doing. You get to see more Darth Sidious. Of course, we get plenty of him in the other movies, but we get to really see him at work, playing both sides. We get to see how how General Grievous comes to exist and how his original exposition is. Now, it changed a little bit from because these came out in between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. His character design changed a little bit before Revenge of the Sith finally came out, but they worked in a lot of details of that. He gets to feel like a truly menacing character. He's picking off the Jedi, he's killing them. You see him training with Dooku. So it really brings that character to life and gives him a much bigger impact when he finally dies. Same thing with Dooku. Gives Dooku a bigger weight for when he dies. We also get a couple of new characters. The main new character you get is this Sith trainee whose name has just fled my mind. So you can leave it down below in the comment section. Count Dooku goes and recruits her to be a Sith trainee and to lure Anakin out. Anakin's really the target. And even though she thinks that she's an important, person, it's revealed as things are going that they really don't view her as important. She's really just a means to an end, which is to bring Anakin closer to the dark side, to force him to fight battles and play dirty and to have hatred, to embrace his negative feelings. So you do get that new character, and I think that was a good one. So I don't know why her name is not sticking in my mind, but that's how it works sometimes. You get old and you forget things. Otherwise, you get some other good expansion of characters that you know. Obi-Wan and Anakin, you have a further development of their relationship. This kind of the tension that exists between them, as Obi-Wan being a superior versus Anakin being his inferior, to Anakin ascending and becoming a real Jedi Knight, going through a trial, and of course having some temptations as part of that trial. That happens in the second half of the Star Wars: The Clone Wars. All of those sequences are really good. They really help enhance the character. You get to see Anakin be both a competent warrior and a good fighter. You get to see him make mistakes. You get to see him learn the consequences of those mistakes. And you get to see him again step a little bit closer to the temptations of the dark side, again setting up the final conflict that would create the main story of Revenge of the Sith. You also get a little bit more of his relationship with his wife, Padme Amidala, right? And just more things about how that's secret, about how they have to keep it secret, and the conflict that goes there. It's just a taste. There's not a big part of the story that's devoted to that, but rather it enhances what we see in Revenge of the Sith, which, again, I do appreciate. And then you get tastes of lots of the other Jedi that you get to meet. So there's Mace Windu, that you get to see him actually do some things in the war. There's Yoda, and you get to see him using the Force to like crash ships, which is very fun. You get to see these really competent Jedi doing really competent Jedi stuff. You get to see Kit Fisto, right? The guy with the crazy tentacle dreadlocks and the big fish eyes, like swimming underwater, fighting huge underwater battles on the Calamari planet. All of those scenes had a big impact on my son. He really enjoyed them. Again, because they enhance the setting, but they really show off a lot of the characters and have a lot of tension about what they're going to do and what they are actually accomplishing in the war. It makes the whole war feel a lot more epic as well. Characters like Shaak Ti, who's like protecting Emperor, who will become the Emperor. He's protecting Palpatine. And of course, Palpatine's playing both sides, so he's not really concerned for their safety, nor is he really afraid that they're going to hurt him. He knows that General Grievous has come to kidnap him per his own orders in order to generate a conflict that he's set up ahead of time. So it gets all of that set up there. It sets up that final movement. So let's talk about the plot. The last thing, which I've already mentioned all the elements of this. You can really divide it into part 1 and part 2. Both of these, the main protagonist is Anakin Skywalker, and he's the one that most of the action focuses on. We do have plenty of auxiliary characters like Obi-Wan. But it's about what he's doing. In the first half, it's him being led away from this grand battle to do this duel with the Sith. That's where the conflict is directed towards. And him actually killing her and having this moment of like reveling in the anger and the fury of defeating this opponent in a lightsaber duel. So it really just shows him moving a little bit closer to the dark side. There's lots of other little mini plots in there. There's this crazy alien that's working for the Separatists that it's hard to describe, but Obi-Wan ends up killing him in quite a disgusting and spectacular fashion, which I appreciate. That's part 1. Part 2 is really about setting up all the events that would take place right before Revenge of the Sith, and the movie ends right at the beginning of Revenge of the Sith. So you end the Clone Wars, and boom, you're right at the beginning. You're in the first scene of Revenge of the Sith, which is just great. So it's setting that up. It's introducing Grievous. It's showing him as a really competent, really frightening, and dangerous kind of monstrous villain who's able to kill lots of Jedi, who comes and finally is successful in kidnapping Palpatine. And then you get to watch Revenge of the Sith. So anyway, that's my setup for that. What I think is great about the plot is because it was released in these short little segments, you don't have enough time to have like a big conflict, big resolution. Rather, you have you can introduce something and resolve another thing, and that's all you really have time to do. And all of it has to contribute to the overall story. So you get this really fast-paced feeling where there's lots of tension and resolution happening, lots of plot points happening one after the other in very quick succession. It keeps you really interested in the action and what's going on, and it makes the conflict feel bigger and more epic than it does in the TV format that is the Clone Wars TV show. That's not to knock anything from the later series, but once you get into that TV format, you lose this sense of like you're really watching a grand scale war happening, rather than lots of little stories that are kind of related to the war. It's like you're watching the Clone Wars is what it ends up feeling because of that rapid plot point succession. So anyway, leave me your thoughts down below, what you thought about it. I didn't give you like a by the numbers thing. I would say it's definitely worth watching. It's a lot of fun as far as animated movies go. I think for what it set out to do, it's like an easy 8 or 9 out of 10. It's an A in my book. As far as its overall presentation, it has great aesthetics. It's got good music. The voice acting is good. It's not the actors from the movies, but it's competent and it carries what's there. It's light on dialogue and heavy on action, but it's the action that creates most of the tension. So, of course, I think that action is pretty high quality. And overall, I think the character development and the plot are certainly worth watching as a way to support all of the things that happen in Revenge of the Sith. Really, if Revenge of the Sith could have been like a 4-hour movie, then you could have had an hour and a half of this stuff as part of that movie. It would have made it, I think, a more complete experience, even better than what it was. So leave me your thoughts down below. I'll be interested in reading them. And have a great, great day. Newest book is Demon Ex Machina, which you can get for free by joining my mailing list, dvspress.com/list. I don't know where my copy is, so you can buy these books instead. Keys to Prolific Creativity, which is just a manual for setting up your creative process to get projects done, and Crown of Sight. Important for a book that I will hopefully be releasing at the end of the year called King Leper. So have a great one, and I will see you guys next time.